We will just get going and I'll share my screen in about 30 seconds. Hey, David from CM Tower is joining us in Toronto. Hello, David. It's good to hear from you. Oh, Isaac, you're in Kansas City. That's great. So, our webinars are all about community and this little tribe that we've created over the past. Wow, it's been a year and a few months. It's all about us getting together. So, if this is your first webinar, we welcome you with open arms. Thank you for joining us today on our discussion. If you are a returner to us, then we're just glad that you checked in with us again and joined us today. I'm going to share my screen and we will get going now that we are off and running. So hopefully that poll's going pretty well. Bill, is the poll still open or are we about to close that poll down?
The poll is still open.
Okay, so if you just joined us, and it actually looked like about 20 people just joined us in the last minute, we have a great little poll on the screen. We would love you to go ahead and answer those couple of poll questions so we could share some of that information with everybody. Bill, if you could make me the presenter, I will share my screen, and we will get up and running. Please sign up for our newsletter at gatewayticketing.com community. We've got a really cool white paper. If you have any questions at all, you're always welcome to email us at marketing@gatewayticketing.com. And of course, please complete that little survey there. That's super helpful. All right. So jumping right ahead, welcome to our webinar. Asking questions is an integral part of our program. And this is a screenshot of what your WebEx events tool probably looks like if you're joining us on a tablet or a PC. There's a Q&A section down there at the bottom right. You can put a question in there. Those questions are only visible to us. And if we answer them, everybody will see the response. It's kind of our way to have a chat with you as well. Throughout our conversation, you might want to look at all of our attendees. Visually, you can go into the layout and move into grid format. If some of our folks don't have their video on and you want to hide them from their view, you can do that by clicking the hide participants with video off. So that's probably how the screen would look for you. Our webinars are 60 minutes in length. That's a community discussion with Q&A. We do invite the press and public to join us today. So if you are a member of a press outlet, please let us know in the Q&A so we can say hello to you and let everybody know that we have some folks from the press. If you're also interested in any of the content we talked about today, just drop us an email and we can make the content available. And that content typically is available online within a couple of weeks. We have a website, gatewayticketing.com/community. You can see the recordings of our past recordings. You can also see the upcoming Tuesday talks and webinar sessions, and also download some of our white papers there and sign up for our newsletter. So all that information is available to you on our Gateway Ticketing website. So I'm Randy. I've been doing this at Gateway here since the pandemic started, is when we started our webinar series. That's my contact information there. I'm the wildlife and conservation principal here at Gateway. Joining us today is a great friend of ours, Jared Vaughn. He's our Senior Manager of Customer Service. Jared was also very involved at the Cincinnati Zoo. Hi, Jared. How are you doing today?
Hey, Randy. I'm well. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm so happy that you're joining us today.
I'm excited to be back.
On our webinar. In fact, you joined us on this webinar a handful of times as the Director of Fun at the Cincinnati Zoo before you joined our team. So
that's right. Yeah.
And very, very involved with pricing, dynamic pricing back there. He'll share his knowledge as well. On the Gateway team, we also have Greg Banneker. He's one of our co-moderators. He's our Senior Manager of Marketing. How's it going, Greg? I can see he's not sharing his video. That's okay.
It's going good.
Another super awesome friend that I've known for a long time, Brian Vaughter. Brian is with the Natural Bridge Caverns down in Texas. I love this picture of you, Brian. And I love that almost as much as I love your title from LinkedIn, Cavern Geologist, IT, and Data Geek. So thanks for joining us today, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. And we also have Colby Sellers, who's your admissions manager at the Natural Bridge Caverns, joining us as well. And another great special guest, a good friend of ours, Harry Tomasides from Diginex. And Harry is the chief revenue officer over there, certainly a dynamic pricing expert. So we're going to ask Harry some questions because this is a topic that some of us know a lot about. Some of us are a little unsure about what dynamic pricing is. And I think Harry will be able to add some insight about what is the best thing to do with reservations and pricing and whatnot. We're super excited to have him. Behind the scenes, you have any tech issues, Bill D'Angelo is your guy. Just reach out to Bill and he'll be able to help you out. So cool. Before we get into the data survey results, I always think it's important to talk a little bit about, dynamic pricing and reservations. And this will all come together in a moment. But, Harry, basically most attractions are using some form of one of these three, with probably, static pricing being the norm.
It's the most common. And, and it's the same price every day. And, certainly, is easy to execute, but, it really ignores the differences between days. So it doesn't matter if it's a Tuesday in February or July 4th weekend, the price is the price. And then the next step, kind of the natural transition, is variable pricing, where it's really a series of static prices that can vary by day or vary by time of year. So it's the next step up, and that's where you hear a lot of what peak, off-peak prices are, or value, regular, premium prices. And then with dynamic pricing, which is the next level, is really being able to evaluate demand using multiple factors and providing prices for general admission or special events on a regular basis, and really understanding what that guest demand is. And in light of COVID, as we're all coming back out and trying to understand what our demand is and going to be, it's a useful tool because it makes the learning process a lot quicker for pricing.
Well, and I think that's one of the really interesting things about, like, I've just noticed as a consumer how much things have changed, not just because of COVID, but most recently as we're starting to get used to price fluctuations. We had a chat yesterday, and I think Brian, we're going to talk about fees. I want to talk about convenience fees a bit. And Brian from the Natural Bridge Caverns, I think we had talked that you had really hesitated about adding fees, and I know that this is not just about dynamic pricing, but it's about making more revenue.
Right. Now, we've always wrestled back and forth with the idea of fees. It's something that, I was open to, but the ownership here at the Caverns, we were just generally as a team really hesitant in doing them. And the COVID crisis presented an opportunity where, we needed to take a look at it, at all possible revenue generation that we could experience. And that, I think, is the decisive moment. COVID happened, the pandemic shut down. We were shut down for 53 days. And we opened back up in Texas just before summer in May of 2020. And we opened back up with fees. And of course, we were all terrified of the backlash that we would find. And we opened up, our transaction fees were at $1.99, and then now they're at $4.99. And we jumped up that far. We've never had any problems with it. There is one thing I'll say, is that also something else that happened in 2020 with the COVID crisis is we saw an unbelievable percentage of our daily tickets sold moved to pre-sales off of our web store. And that also meant that we were, in some cases, up to 60% of our daily ticket sales were sold in advance online. And prior to 2020 and COVID, if we got 20% of our daily sales sold online, we thought that was a pretty good job. So it also pushed all of those sales online, which means you also have a lot of other things that happen that had to be taken into account. And one of the things is we had to deal with people missing their cave tours. We're about 30 minutes outside of San Antonio, and people don't factor that into their visit. And so they'll purchase a ticket for 1 p.m., but then they suddenly discover they're not going to make it. And so we had to actually assign more staff to dealing with that whole back end of it. And that fee also helps to go to pay towards that effort as well now. So, there's definitely a lot of things that fee is helping us cover from a revenue generation standpoint, but then also from a physical cost standpoint for us being able to cover those wages in time.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, one of the points that you made there, Brian, that I think, we should really highlight is, the feedback that you've received has been like next to nothing. And
yes.
I think that the general feeling out there around convenience fees is that you're going to get hit with tons of backlash, and it just doesn't happen. And I think, if you really think about your experience that you have in buying anything that's experience based online, you're usually met with some sort of fee. So it's commonplace now, it's expected. And I think those places that aren't charging that convenience fee, when you can really look strategically, I know when we put that in place at the zoo, it was really looking at how can we offset some of the costs similar to what you were saying, Brian, but really looking at, okay, let's drive traffic to the web store. Let's get people out of line when they are coming to visit. How can we drive that traffic online? Okay, the efforts that we're going to put in there and the infrastructure we have to put in place to support that traffic comes with elevated costs. So in looking at those elevated costs, how can we help to offset that? And you can really be creative in looking at ways that you can offset different costs as it comes to your store or your technology costs by driving your traffic online. And there are other benefits to it as well. There are studies out there that show that advanced purchase helps with increasing per capitas inside the attraction. Just because of that mindset that you're really, especially if someone's purchasing their tickets days or weeks ahead of time, it's that mindset of what money am I spending today while I'm actually at the attraction. There's more of a willingness to pull out, the pocketbook or the wallet and be able to spend because you're purchasing in advance. So,
I'll bet there's a lot of psychology around that too. And I've had conversations with great friends of mine that run, aquariums. And one conversation in particular, the person had said, well, we raised the price and we raised it a lot, and we thought that we were going to get all this blowback. But what they actually got was a better experience for everybody. Now, it means that you might, those people might just have more income, right? They might have more discretionary spend available because you brought in a different tier of guests. That's possible. But they might value that experience more because they paid more. Right? It's like when I go and have like a $10 hamburger, I might be like thinking, oh my gosh, this really it's a big hamburger, it's amazing. But the reason why I went off our script a tad here, but I wanted to talk about fees first. And Harry, I did this because fees are a way that many attractions start to test the marketplace to understand that price elasticity. So when Jared and Brian start talking about adding fees, and it might be $1, and now it's up to $4.99. It's starting to be an area where we can add some revenue to our business. And Isaac is asking a great question in our chat about what do those convenience fees go to? Well, pushing more people online is going to have more. There's could be more costs. You might have a ticketing engine that, or you might partner with a ticketing company that charges more by the number of online transactions. So certainly that fee could be going to that. But there's other types of costs involved with that. And sometimes it's just a revenue opportunity. So talking about fees is a good start. I actually want to show a little bit of the data here. And I've got a couple slides before I get there just to kind of tell the story. I don't need to, I was looking for flights to Los Angeles recently. We already know that there's a lot of price elasticity in the marketplaces. The flight industry has been playing with prices, and I was astonished to see that I can get a $108 fare from Nashville to Long Beach on the same day that they're charging, $385 or $433, right? That's a wide variance, and just you can see American Airlines same day, same variance, right? So these two, I'm not going to call them attractions. These competitors are monitoring each other's prices, and they are clearly doing some research there. But dynamic pricing or surge pricing is also very popular with the ride sharing apps like Uber. And I wanted to bring this up because this is a fascinating study, and it's not recent at all. It's from 2015, but it really talks about why is Uber doing this? Well, it's because during the surge period, they need more drivers. And what they're trying to do is level the peaks and valleys to have enough. They're trying to meet the demand, and they do that. They influence behavior based on price. So we're obviously used to this type of surging. In the fee-based world, a lot of this slide here is probably going to make sense to a lot of people that are here attending. In the last year, you've probably done a lot more food delivery than you did the previous years. But this is just telling you a little bit about fees and markups on top of, your standard restaurant list price. Postmates is charging up to 40% more just for that experience. So understanding that the marketplace is used to this, if you're not an attraction that's doing any type of pricing, it would be good to discuss that. But this is some data. Bill, do you want to share a little bit of this? This is just the data that we got from our surveys. Oh,
sorry, I had to dig into the unmute button there. Sure. So the first survey question regarding when our different respondents plan on lifting the need for reservations. We had 15% of the respondents say that they plan on stopping reservations when capacity limits for their facility end. 32% of respondents basically said even after capacity limits end, they plan to continue requiring reservations, which I can't say as I blame them. It's nice to be able to know when that revenue is coming and have a defined use date for that ticket. 7% said they don't require reservations at all, which frankly I was kind of surprised it was that high a number. And then a whopping 46% have not decided what they're doing with reservations as of this point.
I'm not shocked about the indefinitely one. Brian, by the way, everybody, Brian does have a face. He is sharing his video, but I think he's got some bandwidth problems in his app. So I've been texting him, and he's mentioned that if you can't see Brian, he looks just like that picture. He's probably down in the caverns spelunking right now, sharing with us. So Brian, when we talk about reservations, we're talking about advanced tickets, selecting a date. You're not necessarily requiring them right now, but you have seen quite a spike in that. But are you going to continually require that your guests have to select a date and time to visit the caverns? Is that something you're just going to do in the future forever?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, everything we do here is based upon a date and a time. We used to have some kind of well, okay, so our tickets used to be back in the day. Um, One of them was the Hidden Passage tour was strictly date and time controlled. You had to pick a date, you had to pick a time, and that went on. The Discovery tour, having a greater capacity on it, was more of a you picked a day, but you didn't worry about the time. And so when you were ready to show up, you'd show up, present your ticket to the booth, and we'd get you on the next available tour. There's been some discussion that we might bring that type of a ticket back, but it would come at a premium price. So if you didn't really, you knew that you wanted to come and do a cave tour, but you really weren't sure when or what time, that ticket, that type of a general admission ticket may return to our offerings. But again, it's going to come at a very high price, because that would be the price that you would pay for that kind of privilege of, not really knowing when you were going to visit. And so, you might end up showing up on, July 4th weekend at 2 o'clock, which is our peak on property time. And so, that ticket then covers that. But we're going to stick, right now, we're sticking with every tour has an event and a time, and you have to choose that in advance for it.
And it's interesting because, actually, before I do this with you, Brian, let me go to Jared for a moment. Jared, you were working at the zoo during COVID, during the reopening at the Cincinnati Zoo. What direction were you all going at the Cincinnati Zoo in relation to reservations?
Well, I mean, the problem that we ran into more often than not, and obviously it's been a bit since I've been at the zoo, but was struggling with folks showing up during the reservation times, and then a lot of folks not showing up for the reservations, especially members. So there was a lot of flexibility there because of that. The direction as far as the path forward, I'm not sure on. I could probably put forth some guesses, but I don't know that I want to do so in this setting. But when you're not having folks show up, it's less. You're having to compensate then and make a lot of educated guesses, and that can start to play with your data, and that can mess things up when you have a sudden spike of folks show up that you maybe weren't anticipating before and put you in a sticky position with a lot more attendance that's showing up. So there was a lot of feel based on where the trends were at the time.
Yeah, and speaking of trends, we just had a great question come in from Cherry at the Brevard Zoo in Melbourne, Florida, seeing that their pre-sale ticket count is either double or triple on a daily basis due to the walk-up. So the walk-up experience, I think pre-COVID, and I think this is an area where reservations start to change how we run our business, right? Because if we know people are coming in advance and we know how many of them are coming in advance, it helps us better understand how we can service those guests that might be coming on site or they might be purchasing on site. But it also lets us start playing in the dynamic pricing sandbox because now we know more information in advance. Brian, I actually have a slide here of the change in behavior from pre-COVID and post-COVID of walk-up versus on-site. Maybe you could tell us, I mean, you're basically seeing this huge shift into, online right around the pre-2020.
Right. Yeah, we had been seeing a slow move towards more online sales, and a lot of that was because we shifted in 2019 was when we first started with full dynamic pricing for all of our admission tickets for cavern tours. Prior to that, we were just a statically priced site. And but in 2019, we working with Diginex started the dynamic pricing model for our attraction, and that's really where you see that, you know, going from 17% to 26% was that. And you know, the whole messaging was, you know, buy your ticket in advance and get a better ticket price for doing so. And so that really started to drive those sales online. And then, yeah, 2020, post COVID, we opened up the first Friday in May is when we opened back up. And you know, the whole message at that point was, you know, purchase your tickets in advance. And you know, we still continued driving, you know, the pricing message that, you'll get a better price, a better value by purchasing well in advance. And many factors took over at that point to help start driving online ticket sales at
And
that point.
yeah, and let me add, like, with and Jared's in this boat as well. The organizations that are doing dynamic pricing, none of them call it dynamic pricing. Like Cincinnati Zoo, Natural Bridge Cabins, others, they call it plan ahead pricing. At the Indianapolis Zoo, it's pick your day, pick your price, pick your package. So it's very consumer focused, to where the consumer has a lot of choice and control and can pick the day that best fits their budget. So it's really about a really positive message of plan ahead pricing. And so that's part of the reason, I think, too, that the online, the gap between walk up and online is growing.
And Harry, you made a point there that I want to touch on in keeping that message positive. A lot of folks look at dynamic pricing as this scary thing in turn because of somewhat what Randy highlighted earlier with the airline industry. They've given it this reputation, and really it's not that. I think the other way that you can really look at dynamic pricing is giving folks an opportunity to visit your attraction that maybe couldn't have before. So I know that was one of the pushes that we had at the zoo when I was there, was really being able to look at it from an accessibility front and taking the baseline general admission pricing that may have started at $17, $18 before, and being able to, as you can see right there, dropping that price to make that lower. So at some points of the season, it was as low as $12 or $13, which is an incredible savings, especially if you're looking at a family of 8, let's say, that's coming to a visit to the zoo. They maybe couldn't have afforded that before, and suddenly you're opening up that opportunity for those folks to come and visit. And you're not having, as you can see here, you're not having to plan that far out to be able to get a discount. Providing that opportunity for those families to come who maybe couldn't have before, that's a positive. That's something that you can really advertise and push, that if you're planning out, you have an opportunity to get a really discounted ticket and a really great value to visit.
Jared, I love what you're saying, because I think a lot of attractions that are here, and I'm looking at the list, many of them, and I know the results of the survey question about dynamic pricing. A good portion of them are actually just have static prices. And I think it's a little scary to think about moving into a space where you start playing with prices, because there's that fear that if you go up too far, that guests will not come. But those places that have static prices are also habitual discounters, right? Like they throw your discounts all over the place. And then you have the negative result of doing that, and I would challenge anyone here, is that when you discount everywhere and you discount to these certain regions and you try to bring these people in at a $5 or $10 off, the problem then is that you have people that would have paid more that are just going to take advantage of the discount because you handed it to them. Why wouldn't they do it? Whereas I think the dynamic pricing engineer, I clearly, if I'm price sensitive and I really want to take my family to the zoo, I'm going to find a way to go on one of these $17 days in a few weeks.
Well, if there's to that point though as well, if there's a different experience on, let's say, the weekend where there are more shows that are going on, or there are more attractions open, there are more food locations that are open, that's all value that's there for the visitor that's coming. And we really need to recognize that. Giving out those discounts and really spreading those out there is devaluing the experience that your visitors are having. So making the price more on a day where there's more going on is just simply saying that there's a lot of value there in the experience that they're having. And they have those high expectations, but at the same time, you're able to deliver on those days. And the energy of the crowds is not always a negative thing by means of there's people everywhere. People bring energy with that as well.
Yeah. And
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Was that?
No, I was just going to kind of, expand on what Jared was saying. I mean, I think when you think about dynamic pricing, what you're not doing anymore is limiting yourself to a single price point. I think it's almost more risky to limit yourself to a single price point as opposed to, learn what the demand is and understanding what the price should be based on what the data is saying. Because with dynamic pricing, you're looking at, there's data that's coming out of Gateway. There's data that is that's put into the algorithm, such as weather, school calendars, Google Analytics, and all those things are ingredients that make intuitive sense to have pricing impact. But it's making sure that data is used to select the optimal price for a particular day or a particular time of day. And so you could say it's more risky to have a single price point, but rather give your guests a constellation of choices that best fit their budget.
So there is a question that's out there that I think is good to bring up in this exact conversation, but is dynamic pricing successful in situations where your competitors are holding to the static pricing model? So one of the great things about partnering with a partner like Diginex is that they're taking these types of factors into consideration. So there are a number of factors out there, anything from gas prices to what competitors are charging for tickets and what special events are in town. All sorts of factors are going into that algorithm to help to determine the suggested pricing for the day.
It's a fantastic question. I want to, Colby, I want to get you involved here in a second. I have a question about, we were talking, there's some other questions about, do you see visitors really affected by the change of pricing? Do they emotionally bring this, oh, I had to pay so much? What is you, as the manager of admissions, you're there at the front lines. Do you see that there's a big change in behavior if people pay more or less? Or are simply people willing to pay more and they almost just don't even notice that someone else paid less? What's your take on the guest experience from a pricing perspective when they come to the door? That's a silly thing. Caverns don't have doors. When they come through the caverns.
We don't really get any. It's interesting because we raise those prices and nothing. We don't get any. We don't get comments about it. You don't hear anything. It's really almost as if they're expecting to pay those higher rates. It is interesting to see. A lot of people don't realize that our prices do change. Those people that purchase tickets on site, they have no clue that our prices change daily. Sometimes even if they've been on our website, they still don't realize that they have changed daily. But as far as any guest feedback, I mean, there hasn't been any. It's as if nothing ever happened.
And I can see, based on what I'm seeing here, there's a lot of play here in those price changes. There's times when you're up 50 cents but there's a wide variance in just the next 7 days to see 23.75 up to 28 or 23.50 up to 28. And if the guests aren't affected at all, that's actually really great news for anybody that's looking to get more revenue. Do people on the days when it's priced higher, is it always that it's more crowded, or is that just something that's added to the conversation or to the calculation?
The days that we are priced higher are normally weekend days, holiday weekends, when our attendance is going to trend up. But you know, we will watch the prices, and we go in, and sometimes we may bump a price or we may lower a price, just depending on the trends. Everyone knows as well as I do, with COVID, there's no trend set. It's something different every day. So you just, I just watch it and play with the trends that we have coming in our door at the moment and adjust based off of those needs.
That's good information. Thanks. And for everybody, I think that is kind of confused about how maybe what tools you're using. So you also partnered with Diginex, and I've seen it, so I know a little bit about it, but maybe Brian or Jared, you could come in a little bit. There's like a dashboard that there's pricing recommendations made from the economists at Diginex that you basically approve or don't approve. Is that
That's
how
right.
this goes?
Yes.
And then you could override them and make if you knew that there was a special event happening in town, you could say, oh, this musician's in town and we're going to get more traffic, and it was a last minute show, or you just became super TikTok famous because you just bought up a tram ride and people want to come and check it out.
And sometimes it's not just that. At the end of the day, they're recommendations. So it's taking data points, and no one knows your business better than you. So when you know what typical trends look like for a weekend day in June, where otherwise it might be recommended that the price is a little bit lower because ticket sales aren't as high in advance, there doesn't seem to really be anything else that's going on, but we usually get hit hard on this weekend. And historically, the past 3 or 4 years, which even that's taken into consideration sometimes, we know we're going to see a big crowd. You have the ability to adjust that and to decline that price and put whatever price you feel is right is in there. And I will tell you, when I was in charge of that process, I did that quite a bit. I went with the recommendations quite a bit, but then there were also quite a few times that I went in and changed the price to make it what I felt was right for that weekend. And, the nice part about it as well is it's not set up in such a way where you have to be so intimate with your system to be able to understand how that process works. The process is really geared towards having someone in marketing even with access to it, so they can help to make those decisions. If you're out and someone else needs to make the decision in your place, it's, I think at Cincy, we had 5 or 6 different people on our distribution list who could jump in, and we did a daily quick huddle sometimes before a weekend that was going to be busy to just run through and say, what do we want to make these prices? This is what I think we should go with for this day. And really being able to involve other teams. The process is so easy, and it really just flows nicely as well.
And I just want to make one more point, and maybe stating the obvious, but when those price changes are being made by Colby and Brian and Jared through the integration with Gateway, those prices are automatically updated. So it's not like Jared or Colby or Brian are going into Gateway and manually updating all these prices. So I just wanted to state the obvious.
Yeah, well, and not everybody's using Gateway that's on the call either, but I think that the story here is that you have the control to override it if you want. Brian, yesterday I think you had said you're almost totally fully automatic, and meaning that you've tested the dynamic pricing enough to know that the algorithm is mostly on point. It's going to generate the most amount of revenue. So you can almost just let it go automatically. In fact, the only time you actually do anything to it, I think, is when you want to override something. So you take all the recommended changes, and then occasionally you might play with the price. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. And we definitely, starting really last year, after the shutdown, we definitely have taken a more hands-on approach. Colby is the one that's really monitoring our, the prices that we receive from Diginex, and we'll get that price update for tomorrow at 10 a.m. each morning, and we have until 6 p.m. that day to make whatever changes that we want to make. If we're perfectly fine, and most of the time we are, then we don't do anything. And the way that the sandbox has been created with Diginex, the pricing model is, if they don't hear anything back from us by 6 p.m., then they are going under the assumption that we are fine with the pricings that they have recommended for the future, and then they will publish out at 12:01 is when the publish goes through, and all of the prices update at that point. And that's pricing for both the web store and for all of the pricing in the future. And it's also updating the day of prices. So when our staff gets there, tomorrow morning, and they turn on the point of sale system, the prices that they see displayed on the screen, those are the prices that are going to be in effect for that day. So, works really well.
That's great.
It's
And
the same for us too.
same thing, Jared. Is that what you did?
It's the same thing for us too. And I don't know how your all setup looks, but we also had some customization in the signage package that we had as well, where our digital displays were tied into the price changes and being able to look for those every morning. So the price changes would actually go through and publish overnight around 3 or 4 a.m. And then the signage package would look for updates by 7 a.m. and actually publish those to each of the pricing signs. So that way, that day's signs were the most up to date.
Yep, we did the same thing as well.
And I believe for most people that are doing this model, the on-site price is very typically the rack rate, or as close to the rack rate as possible. You're almost always going to have your highest price the day of on-site.
Correct. That's the way that our model is set up. The highest price, and that's the way all of the messaging takes place too. That if you wait until the day of, the walk-up price, the gate price, is going to be the highest price that you could have paid for that particular ticket.
Well, and I mean, I used to struggle with this when I used to be involved with pricing at the water park I worked at as well. And we would always say, it's like, look, I parked the car. I got the kids are in the bathing suit. They're out of the car. They're walking to the gate. I'm going to pay pretty much whatever the gate price is at that point. Otherwise, I'm going to have the wrath of my entire family against me, right? So I think that's a level, of course. And I think it also helps because you don't want to have that guest recovery issue where you might have a guest that just showed up and you know that they just paid less, and then you have a dissatisfied guest because maybe they paid more in advance. So I think that was one of the questions that came through as well. I would highly recommend day of pricing. Yeah, Harry's going to agree. Right?
Yeah. And I was just going to say, I mean, there's, that's part of that transparency with the calendar that you saw, or what Natural Bridge Caverns had was, there's complete transparency, and there's really no daylight between an online price and the walk-up price. It is whatever that price is that day, that's the price.
So we did do things slightly differently at Cincy, and I'm pretty sure that that's still in place. Was we actually started pushing online traffic before dynamic pricing, and that's when the birth of convenience fees for us at the time came about, was really putting the marketing effort into saving time, buy your tickets online, and then saving money as well. So there was always a $2 price difference between what you would buy online and what you would purchase at the gate. So we carried that over when dynamic pricing came along or plan ahead pricing came along. So and that's always stayed the same. So no matter what you see online, it's always $2 more expensive at the gate. Part of that is recognizing, being a zoo where the Cincinnati Zoo is placed, there are a lot of people that walk up that maybe are from around the community, or especially, again, taking into consideration the accessibility piece, and some folks who maybe don't have online access and they're walking up, and to have the sticker shock of paying the highest price, you're all of a sudden excluding an entire group of people. So to be able to provide them at least whatever the day's price is minus plus a couple of dollars, it is still allowing those folks to be able to get in and not have that sticker shock. But I think it really is just dependent of where you're at and what your clientele looks like.
Yeah, I don't think we've had a webinar with this many questions, by the way, and we are doing our best to answer them. Bill is, if you see in the video of Bill, he's frantically typing. So we absolutely want to get to all your questions. But I want to share a little bit more results with you guys as well. We asked a little bit about how you, as an attraction, handle pricing. And this is an area where I think there's so much opportunity. With 62% of the attractions joining us today doing static pricing and only 17% of them starting to go into seasonal, you can see here that, you know, your dynamic footprint is less than 40% of the folks that are out there if you include seasonal price changes. There's probably a lot of money left on the table. And I want to encourage the attractions that are joining us today that COVID you have to look at the gift that we've been given in terms of this pandemic. And it's not a great thing that we've all gone through, but one of the byproducts has been capacity, whether it's been local, state, and it's been mandated, and that it has been in most areas. Because we're starting to require capacity limits, and the only way to do that is usually with advanced ticket purchasing, we now have at our disposal the opportunity to look at pricing. I'd say phone a friend. If you're a zoo that if you know another zoo that's done it, talk to them and ask them, what did you do first? Because you can start to play with prices just a little bit with your ticketing software. Almost every ticketing software out there that I know of is going to let you have some type of variance where you can start to change the price, or at least offer a little bit of a discount in advance, or pick the day. So I would say start looking at those types of options for you. Partner with somebody like Diginex and just say, what do I have to do first? Like, what do I need to just do an analysis? Because I think reservations might be here longer than we would imagine they'd be. We saw a little bit of that in the previous survey question. And for those of us that are exploring the space and you have special events, that is a great training ground for dynamic pricing. In fact, Jared, you guys, I think that's how you started at the Cincinnati Zoo. You had your very popular event. Was that right? Did you start?
Yeah, Festival of Lights. Yeah. So it was really, it all kind of started in looking at, we had the conversation about dynamic pricing for a number of years. Our friends over at the Indy Zoo had been, had some conversations with our director a number of years back in the benefits that they were seeing with dynamic pricing. And it was, that stigma was still out there about it. And what negativity are we going to see come our way as a result? And we were presented with a unique opportunity in really looking at the accessibility front, and then also looking at a gap by means of a sponsorship dropping off for the holiday event. How are we going to make up that money? And Festival of Lights is a really popular event in the Cincinnati area. People come from all over as a tradition to come to Festival of Lights. Mm-hmm. So it was really an opportunity, and that's the other thing that we always do as well with Festival of Lights is this is our test bed. This is literally a chance for 40 to 41 nights to test out a new concept, see if it works, and then push it forward into the regular season. And that's exactly what we did. The thought was we would see some success with it, and it ended up being more wildly successful than we could have ever dreamt. And the proof is in the pudding. With the zoo still uses dynamic pricing to this day, and it's incredibly popular, and using it for that short period of time to really test it out proved successful beyond our wildest dreams.
Colby, we have a question for you, and it's when you start talking about dynamic pricing, inevitably there's the customer service side of it, and we have lots of questions being asked about the problem just with advanced reservations, right? Like, how do I manage my reservations if I have to change the date, if I have to change the time? So Colby, how does the Natural Bridge Cavern handle like rescheduling requests? Maybe somebody paid a different price and there's a price difference between the two dates. How do you all handle that today? Oh, you're muted, Colby.
When we get those people that bought a ticket for today but can't come for 2 days from now, pricing in their orders are actually adjusted to what the current online rate is for that day. Obviously there's always stipulations to some of that, but as far as rescheduling them, the majority of our missed times and stuff like that are for the same day. It's not a high percentage that call and ask for their reservations to be switched unless there's a snowstorm or COVID. But other than that, we don't deal too much with it, but the protocol for that is to follow the pricing on our website, essentially. And that's the rate they get.
And you also brought up something, you definitely want to make sure that you have access control rules so that if they can't usurp the system. They can't buy a ticket that's cheaper and use it on a different day. So I think that's kind of an obvious, but you need to make sure that you stand your ground there.
Right.
I've seen some places just charge a change fee, or instead of just charging the full price difference, they just have like a change fee. That's kind of an easy way to handle it, as long as that change fee covers most of the price differences. It's expected. I always go back to the reason why I show slides like the airline industry and the Uber industry is that those types of behaviors are training up our customers for what they're expecting. So when you're spending 40% more to have food delivery and you're paying a fee on top of it, it's why you can charge $4.99 for a convenience fee if you need to. It's because we've been conditioning and training folks that's okay behavior. I want to hit up a question we have. It's from Harriet about reservations, and that was one of the topics we were having today. But Harriet says, how are people managing their members who don't like to pre-register to arrive? I think that's a really great question, because a lot of the reasons why people have a membership program is that you can come anytime you want. I was actually talking to somebody from a friend of mine that works at a theme park, and we were talking about the membership reservation season pass issue. And what I think you're going to start seeing is that there's going to be this differentiator in the levels of memberships or passes, where that maybe you do have a price tier that supports that guest can always come and they don't need a reservation. That might open the door for an opportunity for you to start selling memberships at a higher rate, bring in more revenue. And it's just like dynamic pricing, it's probably found revenue. You don't even realize that you could charge it. There's this group of people that will pay it, and then now they can come anytime you want. And what, of course, you need to do is make sure that you control your numbers of memberships to allow for that. The other area that me and this person were talking about is kind of just kicking up ideas about what does the future of memberships look like. I kind of think that we might end up being, I brought up Topgolf before, but if you've ever been to Topgolf, you go to Topgolf, you reserve a bay, and you pay for the bay. But you can reserve in advance, and they actually charge you for the right to make a reservation. And I've been kind of hearing that some places are going to explore that, where maybe we always allow a certain number of members and season pass holders to come in advance. I'm sorry, to come on site the day of, and we always will welcome, but we might sell out it's conditional. We might not be able to have you join us that day. And if that's the case, you can now start charging dynamically the right to make a reservation to reserve your spot. So I think we might start to see that coming around a little bit. Harriet, it is a challenge. Just like cancels and no-shows are a very big challenge for the nonprofits that are having $0 reservations, because people are gobbling up reservations and then they don't actually show up. So I think that is quite a challenge there.
You know, Randy, just in a couple of conversations I've had with different organizations, it seems like the trend may be going to, if you're a member, you just don't need to make a reservation because it's hard to manage as it is. And then if it's general admission, you make the reservation and pay the ticket price. But, you know, those are just a couple of things I heard.
Yeah, and as long as the places like Disneyland, this is from their website today, right? As long as Disneyland is going to continue to sell out, now granted it's because of capacity controls, I think we're going to continue to see this relationship on the left side. They're going to sell out certain days, or some parks won't be available. And then on the right side, there's going to be availability, and you're going to see this variance here. This is their dynamic pricing model for May. You can see it, it's right on their website, and you might not be charging $154, but I would certainly suggest that maybe you could see what the market is, how the market is fluctuating, and what they're doing to support this. So it's interesting here. They even say they don't even have the ability to go on the 4th, 5th, or 6th, yet they're still showing what the price was for those folks if you bought it. So you can see the relationship here right on the Disneyland website to their capacity and availability and their pricing. I think it's a great tool to look at. Well, I mean, we're a little bit over. Any closing remarks, comments, questions Jared, Colby, Brian, anybody want to share any closing remarks about this topic besides the fact that Charlie suggested we have a part 2 of this, which I think we need to based on the popularity. Any closing thoughts, anybody?
Hey, Randy, I'd add that, you know, and Harry, you back up, and it took us, I think, almost a year to get our dynamic pricing solution built, and that was not because of Diginex dragging their heels or anything. They were actually kind of like, come on guys, make decisions. Dynamic pricing was a scary topic for us to tackle. You know, there were a lot of perceived hurdles there, the least of which wasn't, you know, how the public was going to perceive and receive the notion of us going to dynamic pricing. By and large, most of the fears that we had, once we finally got it kicked off and we saw that it wasn't the end of the world and taking us over this dark precipice, once we got it rolling, it was like, oh, wow. Okay, we should have done this a lot sooner. So, you know, yes, it's a scary topic. You know, I would imagine for most organizations, it's going to be a big deal if you're really considering and serious about it. I definitely say put some thought into it. Get all the stakeholders involved in it, especially marketing. Accounting is a good one to have involved too, as we found. But you know, Diginex helped us get past a lot of the fear and trepidation of it. And, you know, and like I said, now looking back on it, you know, the question is, how come we didn't consider this sooner?
Hey, I'm gonna put you on the spot because we had a question from a good friend of ours, John Rouse. Can you share with us at all, Brian? And I know I'm going overtime. How much more revenue you might expect? Can you share a percentage? Like, can you share with us like maybe
yes, because COVID times we were dealing with state mandated reduced capacities. I think at our lowest point we were like only operating at like 25% of our total capacity, and then we've slowly added until now today, you know, we're back up to 100%. We're still seeing on most average days our attendance is down perhaps 10 to 15%. but our admissions is up 30%.
Huh.
So there's the, there's the proof as far as I'm concerned. Dynamic pricing, is saving our boat in this case.
Yeah, that's really good. And also that opens up the conversation about guest experience, right? Which is guests are going to be maybe more accustomed to they've been given this guest experience where you get to walk around an attraction with less people and less crowds. I mean, we would all agree the best, if you ever go to an attraction on a day where it's nearly empty, the consumer are having a fantastic time. Of course, the attraction might be sweating, behind the doors there. But I think maybe people are going to be willing to pay more for that special experience. And as long as you can hit the per cap numbers that you want to hit on your revenue ops on the inside, you might need to be focusing a little bit different on your food and beverage offerings and your retail offerings because, yes, sodas do great. They've got great margin, but they're not just, you don't have enough people to see that margin, really have an effect on your bottom line. So you just got to think about what your offerings are on the inside to cater to that audience. Maybe it's a little different type of food offering or retail.
So something I'll add into that, and this is probably taken straight from Harry's book, is it really depends on what you want to accomplish. So is the goal to drive revenue? Is the goal to drive membership engagement? So really answering that question first, I think, is important. I will say that in the zoo's first full year of dynamic pricing, attendance was flat. Membership visitation was up, paid visitation was down, and there was a high six-figure difference in revenue in the positive as a result of dynamic pricing.
And you're right. It is the goal, and we've had organizations retain us because they have a community accessibility strategy that they're trying to solve. Which dynamic pricing can do that too, to make the organization more accessible to more people while still not blowing a hole through a budget. So it's really what the client wants. And again, it goes back to flexibility in not having one single price point that an organization is tethered to, but rather have a lot of flexibility to make decisions kind of on the fly for your organization.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the good steps that we want to take is just, reach out, get some questions answered, attend webinars like this, attend our next webinar, which will be in the future about our part 2. So we'll schedule that. We would have been over on time, but I better end it here now. But Harry, great information, great insight. Jared, thank you so much for sharing your perspective when you used to be with the Cincinnati Zoo and, of course, working with us here at Gateway. Brian and Colby, thank you so much for sharing today. I appreciate you all. Behind the scenes, Bill, thanks. You were working your tail off with answering questions. If you asked a question that we didn't get answered, we will do our best. Feel free to email us your questions as well. We'll help you in any way we can. It doesn't just have to be about, ticketing. We're happy to point you in the right direction to find good partners to work with for whatever your needs are. Happy to help in any way. We've got this cool white paper you can download that touches on a lot of our post-COVID world ideas and thoughts. So we're just want to be here to help out our awesome industry. As we rebound and see these guests kind of running to our attractions. And that's why we're here doing what we do. So thank you guys all so much for joining us today. We appreciate you. We'll see you in a few weeks at our next webinar. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harry. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care.